you're watching this, we miss you. I'll send you a picture of the board where we have discussed the 3 trig ratios. I'll also send you a video on Remind of the video we watched in class. That's kind of fun to music. Okay, so we just talked about our 3 trig ratios, sine, cosine, and tangent. This is where they're trying to get you to understand why you can use these trig ratios and what is the definition of a trig ratio. So first of all, if you look at the right triangle, any right triangle that has a specific angle measure in it, like 32 degrees, is going to be similar to every right triangle that has a 32-degree angle because of angle-angle similarity, right? So no matter what the size is, whether it's a tiny right triangle or a giant right triangle, if it has a 32-degree angle and a 90-degree angle, they're going to be similar. And that idea of similarity, comparing the 2 triangles, is how they have developed these 3 trig ratios. For every angle, the sine of that angle is going to have this ratio of opposite to hypotenuse. No matter how big the triangle is, no matter how small the triangle is. For whatever angle measure is plugged in here, it's always going to be opposite to hypotenuse. And that comes from the concept of similar triangles. So again, connecting it to last chapter and this chapter. And a trig ratio is just simply a ratio of 2 of the sides. So the opposite and the hypotenuse, or the adjacent and the hypotenuse. And so this is the chart in your notes where they have set that up for you. The definition for sine, cosine, and tangent is simply what that ratio is. So the sine of an angle is the ratio of the opposite to the hypotenuse. And again, that's what we wrote on the board over there. Sine is opposite over hypotenuse. Cosine is the ratio of adjacent to hypotenuse. So cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse. And then tangent is the opposite over the adjacent. So again, opposite over adjacent, and that's what was in the video and what we just wrote on the board. Okay? Again, the opposite and the adjacent change depending on which angle you're looking at. So that's why there's 2 for each one of these depending on which acute angle you're looking at. All right. So when you write correct notation, you are not going to put sine of angle A. The way they're going to write that, again, they're going to truncate it down to 3 letters and just use sine, S-I-N. They're going to drop the angle symbol and just put the letter for the angle. So it'll say sine of angle A like this, getting rid of those things. So you want to use good notation, okay? And that's listed here versus you're not doing this, okay? All right, I'm going to come back to these questions in a moment. I want us to get right to why we would use this. And so I'm going to come back to these and these. And I want to take you right to, first of all, why we're learning this. I'm going to touch it too many times. Okay, so before we set up our problems, the first thing you're going to have to know how to do is use your calculator. You will have to have a calculator that has a sine button, a cosine button, and a tangent button. You do not have to have a graphing calculator. Every scientific calculator has a sine, cosine, tangent button. Your cell phone calculator on it should, if you turn it, most of them turn and they become a scientific calculator. But you do need to make sure, the very first thing you do is you need to understand that angles are measured in different ways. There's degrees, which is what we're doing in geometry, and there's radians, which is what you'll use a lot when you get to pre-cal. If your calculator is in the wrong mode, you will get the wrong answer every single time. It is huge. Before you take the ACT Aspire test, you won't be with me necessarily. You're going to have to remember when you get out your calculator to make sure you've put it in degree mode, or any problem that you do with sine, cosine, or tangent will be wrong. Okay? So, caution, be sure your calculator is in degree mode. So the first thing I want you to do is make sure it's in degree mode. So go to the calculator and go to the mode button. Where's the mode button?
Next to the second.
Right next to the blue second button. You guys see that? Okay, then you're going to look down on that mode button, and do you see where it has an option for degree versus radian, and then there may be a gradient option? Is there 3 or just 2? Okay, some of the scientific calculators also have an option for gradients. You are going to make sure yours is highlighted on degree. Okay, so third one down. Do you see where it says degree versus Okay? You want to make sure you don't just arrow over to degree, but you hit enter so that it stays highlighted. And if you're not sure, quit out of that screen and then go back to mode and make sure that it is highlighted and as degree.
Do we have to switch it back if we're done?
No. The only thing that matters is when you're working with sine, cosine, and tangent. So if you're not doing sine, cosine, and tangent, the mode has no effect on you at all.
Oh,
When you get to pre-cal, there'll be times where you're changing it back and forth based on your problem. Is your information in radians, so you need your calculator in radians, or is it in degree, you need your calculator in degrees, so you'll switch back and forth. But for anything else that's not trig related, it does not have an impact on your problems. Anybody not know how to get to degree mode? Okay, if you have a different calculator, you're going to use your cell phone for a calculator, you have a different calculator with you, I want you to get it out, and I want you right now to make sure you know how to put it in degree mode. Okay, on your phone, whatever you're going to use for a calculator tonight at home.
Oh,
Okay, so you need to make sure that it is in degree mode, and you need to know how to change it to that if you don't know how to change it to that. So if you can't find it, raise your hand and I'll come and help you. All right, so notice it says RAD right here, and if you take it off,
Tap on it. Switch.
uh,
Oh, mine's already in degree.
okay, so
yeah, what's,
that tells you that it's in radian mode. You don't want it in radian mode, so you're going to go back. And if it doesn't say anything here, it is in degree mode.
so it's already in.
It's already in degree mode. If you change it, because this is saying, do you want it in radians? So that means it must be in degree mode. If you change it, then it's going to say radians here, letting you know, hey, it's in radians.
There you go. It's already.
Okay, it says nothing here, so that means it's in degree mode. If you wanted it in radian modes, you would touch that button and it would put it in radian mode. And then it would tell you, hey, if you want it back in degree mode, you just need to touch this button. Okay? Anybody else not find it?
I know how to call this one.
Okay? Okay.
How would I play?
So this should be under mode also. Mode. I don't know.
You can't figure it out. It's fine.
Oh, maybe down here. Here it is. Okay. How do I get back out of that?
All good.
Okay. So right here,
Mhm.
this, how do you do second to get the yellows? Okay, shift, answer. So you want it in number 1 degree mode.
Okay.
No, maybe that's not.
I don't know if you can't figure it out. It's not a big deal. I'll use my phone.
May just have to play around with it later when we have time.
Okay.
But I'm sure I can figure it out.
That's fine. I was
Okay.
just-
Okay. Anybody else not know how to change it? Gradient.
What is it?
Okay. I really don't know, to be honest with you. I don't. I have never taught or used gradients on anything. So I'm sure there's a reason, but I don't know right now. Okay, I want us to move quickly because we have a lot of different examples to get through. Everybody's with me on how to put it in degree mode now. Okay, it doesn't matter to me which device you use. You want to make sure you're comfortable with both. You may want to keep your phone out on your desk at all times today to make sure you understand how to type it in both types. When you take the test in here, you're going to use my calculator. When you're at home, if you're using your phone, you want to make sure that you are able to do it both ways. So make sure you can find your sine, cosine, and tangent buttons. Do you see those on the calculator? They are in white. In blue, up above the sine, cosine, and tangent buttons are the ones we'll use tomorrow. The inverse sine, inverse cosine, inverse tangent. And we'll talk about those tomorrow. That's going to be in blue. Everybody following where I'm at? Okay, right now type in sine 52, and let's see if you can find the sine of 52 degrees to the nearest hundredth. Use your calculator to find the sine of 52 to the nearest hundredth. So you're going to type in sine 52, enter, and what did you get to the nearest hundredth? Okay, so approximately 0.79. Make sure that everybody got that and you know how. And again, you may want to do it on your calculator at the same time to make sure that you can do it with both. You're welcome to leave your phone out on your desk. Okay?
So, 52, or do we press 52? Then.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, so on some of your devices, you're going to have to type it in backwards, 52, then sine. Some of yours will be able to let you just do sine 52. So it depends on what you have. If you have a scientific calculator, if you're trying to use your phone. On the phone, most of them you have to type in the angle and then the trig function. Are we good? Okay. So I'm not going to keep going with more problems like that. You should be able just to evaluate based on plugging those in. Okay, so when we're talking about these trig ratios, something that's important for pre-cal in a couple years, the hypotenuse is always the longest side of a right triangle. So the denominator of a sine or a cosine ratio is always greater than the numerator. Make sure you understand what that's saying. The hypotenuse is always the longest side. So the bottom here is always going to be bigger than the top, right? Which means these numbers will always be fractions less than 1. Okay? So that means the sine and cosine will always be positive numbers less than 1. The tangent, however, is just a relationship between the two legs. So that does not have a value necessarily less than 1 because the opposite could be bigger than the adjacent. So the tangent can have any value greater than 0. Does that make sense with fractions? Okay, so keep that in mind. That's going to be important when you get to pre-cal and you're talking about these in terms of functions. Your sine and cosine are going to have values that are between 0 and 1, whereas your tangent functions are going to go on and they can have any number, okay, get greater and greater and greater. Okay, so here is where we're getting to the meat of why we're learning this. Look at the picture and what do you notice? Okay, you do have feet, but what I notice is I only have one side, right? One side. So can I use Pythagorean theorem? No. Is it a special right triangle with the angle that they gave me? No. Do I have an altitude drawn from the right angle? Okay, so listen carefully to me. When we take this test, you are not taking the test all over trig. The only time you're going to use trig, sine, cosine, tangent, is when these won't work because these give us exact values. The trig ratios are going to give us rounded values because we're going to have to eventually round what we get in the calculator. I want your answers exact as often as we can get them. So we are only using trig as a last resort. That means when you get to the test, if it doesn't say round, then you're probably not supposed to use sine, cosine, or tangent. Okay? So watch your directions. If it doesn't say round, then it should be one of these 3 methods that you could use to solve it. Okay. So in this case, I can't use those 3 methods, so here's what I'm going to do. I am going to try to find the length from B to C. So I'm going to call this X. That means I need to pick an acute angle to start with. Which angle do I want to look at before I label my triangle? Okay, my advice, we could find A, right? But my advice is stick with what they gave you just in case you make a mathematical error. If you find this angle wrong, and then you use that angle, you're going to get everything else wrong. So I would go with what they've given me and do as little math as I have to try to find my answer so there's less room for error. Okay? So I'm going to look at angle B and then I'm going to label my triangle. You want to label the side you know and the side you're trying to find, not all 3 sides. If you label all 3 sides, then you don't know which trig function to use. You're going to label the side you know and the side you want, and then that's going to tell you which trig function to use. So we're going to use angle B. We're going to go across from angle B, and what do we label that side?
Opposite.
Opposite. And we're trying to find which side? Adjacent. So then you're going to remember SOHCAHTOA, and you're going to say, okay, which trig function uses opposite and adjacent? Tangent, TOA. So you're going to start with tangent of, and then you're going to put the angle measure in. What's the angle that we're looking at? 15. So it's tangent of 15 equals, and it's always the opposite over the adjacent. So what's the opposite? 10.2, and the adjacent is x. And now we're going to solve. I'm going to show you the way that we've been doing from chapter 7, and then I'm going to remind you of the shortcut that they showed you in the video. So chapter 7 would say, put this over 1 and make it a fraction, and then do what? Cross multiply. So we would cross multiply, and we would get x times the tangent of 15. Keep in mind, tangent of 15 is all one thing. Okay, you can't just type in tangent on your calculator and hit enter. It can't be done by itself. You have to have it all together. So tangent of 15 equals 1 times 10.2 is 10.2. And then what would we do to get x by itself? Divide by the tangent of 15. And again, keep it all together. It's all one number. So we would divide by the tangent of 15, divide by the tangent of 15. So these cancel. So x is going to equal 10.2 divided by the tangent of 15. And it says to round to the nearest what? 100. So you're going to type that in on your calculator, 10.2 divided by the tangent of 15. And then tell me what you get to the nearest hundredth.
7.3.
I'm hearing different answers. 10.2 divided by tangent 15. Okay, so it's 38.07. So the distance from B to C is approximately 38.07, which is, yes. And I will tell you, I won't necessarily count off, but I did have a professor in college who was super picky. And if I didn't put approximately when I had rounded, then I missed points. If it was exactly that value, then we used an equal sign. So you never know. Make good habits so you don't have to break them later. Are we good? Everybody understands? Okay, let's try another one. Javi says no. Let's try again, see if this makes more sense. Okay, caution, super important. Do not round until the final step of your answer. So if you are using values that you had defined in your calculator, you're going to keep the value that's in your calculator. You can write on your paper something like 38.07 just to show your work, but you're not using 38.07 in your answer. You're using the entire value in your calculator and continuing to work with it. You never round until the final step. And if you don't do that, then you're going to miss a half a point every time because your answer is going to be off a little bit. So don't round until the very, very end. Okay, let's try another one. So we want to find QR. So we're looking for this side X. Again, which angle should we look at? Okay, P 63 degrees. We could find R, and we could use R, but it's better not to make a mistake, so I would probably stick with what I know. Okay, label the side you know, label the side you're looking for. So the side we're looking for is what? Opposite. And the side they gave us? Careful. It is adjacent, but it is across from the right angle, so it's not the adjacent side, it's the hypotenuse. So remember, an angle is going to have two adjacent sides. One of them's the adjacent side, and one of them's the hypotenuse. So make sure that you label the hypotenuse correctly. Okay, which trig function is going to use opposite and hypotenuse?
So we do the one that we're given and the one that we're trying to find?
Yep. So I'm going to use which trig function? Sine, because it is opposite over hypotenuse. So I'm going to do sine of what angle? 63. Always put your angle measure in there. Equals opposite x over 12.9 hypotenuse. It's always the opposite over the hypotenuse. So order matters. Okay, now, I didn't show you the shortcut in the video a second ago on the last one. In the video, I don't know if you caught this, and you don't have to use this shortcut unless you're going to remember. But when x is on top, he says, you just multiply. When x is down below, you switch, you know, is what he says in the video. So on the one that we just did, so I'll show you back here. And again, don't use this if it doesn't make sense. But back here, oops, since we had x down below in the denominator, he said all you do is switch, you know. So these two just end up switching, and we get x equals 10.2 over the tangent of 15. So when x is down below, you just switch. Okay? When x is up high, you multiply. That's how he says it in the video. When x is up high, you multiply. When x is down below, you switch, you know. So x is up high, so all we're really going to do here is multiply these two. But again, the reason we're getting that is because we're putting this over 1 and cross multiplying. So it's just x equals 12.9 times the sine of 63. Okay, now I want to warn you again. I put my 12.9 in front of my trig function so I wouldn't make a mistake. You are not multiplying the 12.9 times the 63. You are multiplying 12.9 times this number, which is the sine of 63. That is all one number. Okay? So don't do 12.9 times 63. And if you type it in on your calculator, just to keep you from making a mistake, put the 12.9 first and then the sine of 63. That way the calculator doesn't accidentally, if you type it in wrong, multiply. Okay, nearest hundredth, what do we get? So QR is approximately 11.49. What are my units? Centimeters. Good, I forgot it on the last one, so go back on the last one and put feet, I think it was, right? Put feet on your answer so you don't forget. Easy?
Yes.
It's not bad, right? Try the next one on your own with your partner.
Alright, so I got set 39.
Yeah. Like, what does this mean?
We're trying to find that's the X over 20. Because it can be 20, which is the choose.
Trying to find a hypotenuse, so the hypotenuse has to be in there. So it's not that one. So it's either that or that. And this is this, since this is that, is that just the adjacent because it's adjacent to this?
But we're not labeling this side because we're not looking for that side and it wasn't given to us. We're only labeling the sides that they gave us and the side that we're looking for.
So what would this side be? Would that be the, no, it's not the opposite because
Correct.
it's the opposite, it's adjacent?
Correct.
Okay. Got it.
Did you round correctly, Karina?
Is X above?
Okay. But you're right on the correct side. Yeah. Yes, don't forget your units. I do too, I told you. This is my most favorite chapter.
Wait, so I have to figure out how to do it.
Okay,
Wow.
for this one. Okay, so on your phone, you're going to type in your 12.9
12.9
divided by,
divided by
and then you're going to type in the angle first, so the 63,
63.
sine, and then you have to enter. So this is the sine of 63, but you have to enter to get it to do the division.
So that's your.
And that's what we got, right? 14.
That's not what you guys got.
Oh,
That was the answer you wrote up there, and I got 14. That's what I got at first.
hold on.
That's not what
You did sine 63 is equal to opposite over adjacent.
That was my first answer, so Harvey said I got it wrong.
Oh.
Which one?
You cross multiplied incorrectly.
That's what you did, Harvey. You multiplied.
Right, you should be multiplying because you're doing, where's your x? Right here, right?
Yeah.
So it's not x times sine 63, it's x times 1. You're cross multiplying like an x.
Yeah. And you got the X, and then.
No. X times 1 is x equals 12.9 times sine 63, a cross multiplication.
Okay, so you don't divide.
No.
You said you don't divide.
Well, that's because I was looking at what you had on your paper, but what you have on your paper is wrong. Okay, so you would just type it in exactly like it looks. You would type in 12.9 times, then again you have to put the angle before the trig function and still hit enter at the end so it gives you the actual answer. Okay, back up here quickly.
That was so fun, Miss Ashley.
Good. So you should have started with 39 degrees, labeled the side connected to it, and labeled the side that you're looking for, which is FD. This side is across from the right angle, so it has to be the hypotenuse. This side is not the hypotenuse, but it is touching it, so it is the adjacent side. The one across from it is the opposite, and we don't know that, and we're not looking for that, so we're not going to label it so that helps us remember. Adjacent hypotenuse is cosine. So you should have written cosine of 39 equals It's always the adjacent over the hypotenuse, so 20 over x. Again, when x is down below, you switch, or put it over 1 and cross multiply. So you would either get this if you cross multiply, and then you would divide by the cosine of 39 to get x by itself, which is exactly what you would get if you just switched your x and your cosine of 39. So if you're thinking about the video and the shortcut he gives you, you just switch and then type it in on your calculator. So what do you get when you type in 20 divided by cosine 39 nearest hundredth?
Meters.
Meters. Good.
Yes. But you still didn't write
Okay.
it, so no. It is right there.
Questions on that?
I'm confused what, like, sine, cosine, and tan can be, like, on the calculator.
The sine is a ratio between two sides of your triangle. So on the calculator, it is a function that has been typed, that has been programmed into your calculator. It is a function, and again, that's what I was telling you. In pre-cal, you'll understand more about it when you actually get to graph it and look at its domain and its range and what does it mean to have a sine function. But basically, in geometry, in right triangles, it is just a ratio of two sides of your triangle. And it's been programmed into your calculator so that when you type in sine, it knows that that's the function that it's using to put the angle measure in and spit out the side lengths. Okay? All right. So I want to go back. I'm going to skip the word problem for right now in case we run out of time because we have two more kinds of problems we need to look at that are different than this. But this is the big idea that we'll lead into, again, tomorrow's lesson. Okay, so is everybody following here? Pick your angle, label your sides you know, the sides you want.
I feel like this is the funnest thing.
Okay, it is. It's going to be so much fun tomorrow, too. Okay, I'm going to click back here. Where did it go? Speaking of the test, while I'm getting us pulled back up, the test is not going to be Monday. Unfortunately, or fortunately, however you want to look at it, we have the Veterans Day Assembly on Monday, and it's going to split our class period. So because it's going to split our class period, we can't take a test that day. We'll have 50 minutes before the assembly, and we'll have 30 minutes after the assembly. So we're going to go ahead and move on to Chapter 10 on Monday. I'm going to teach you a lesson on 10.1, and then that homework won't be due because we'll take the test the next day. So you'll have that next night then again to work on the homework. Probably, yeah. And I'll look at that, and I'll make sure I'm giving you enough time to do your homework and not stress about the homework before the test, okay? But we are going to have to put the test off until Tuesday. Don't wait till Monday night then to study, though. Study this weekend like you have it on Monday, and then that you can just refresh your mind Monday night, okay? All right, so back to here. Quickly. Write a trig ratio as a fraction and as a decimal rounded to the nearest hundredth. This is the most missed question on the test. Write it down and go back when you study and look over this. Because here's what happens. Students think after we learn the lesson tomorrow, today you're not going to understand why it would be mostly missed, but after we learn the lesson tomorrow, students think that they need to go too far on this question. And I'm going to test to see if you know where to stop and where not to stop. Okay, so make sure you're listening to me right now. I'm warning you. Tomorrow's lesson is going to mess you up. Make sure you pay close attention. This does not say to find the measure of angle J anywhere, does it? No. It says find the sine of J. The sine of J is a fraction. That's it. Okay? It is not asking you to go a step further, which is what we're going to learn tomorrow, and find the measure of angle J. And if you go too far on the test, you will get 0 credit because I'm testing to see do you know what it means to find the sine of J. Okay?
So it'll like look like that, like find the sine of J, not like.
It'll say something like exactly like that. Find the sine of J.
But tomorrow it's like measure.
Tomorrow it's going to say find the measure of the angles in the triangle. And so, okay, so there's 2 parts to this question. Number 1, write it as a fraction, and then write it as a decimal. So you're still going to have 2 answers on your homework, but it's the decimal part that always messes everyone up because they think, oh, that means I have to type the sine in on my calculator. You're not using the sine, cosine, or tangent. You are just typing in the numbers writing it as a fraction, and then typing that fraction in and rounding it to the nearest hundredth. Okay, so sine of j. Go to j. Sine is which two sides? Opposite and hypotenuse. Which side is the opposite? 60. Which one's the hypotenuse? So you're going to write 60 over 61. If that can reduce, reduce it. On your homework, it may be able to reduce. So reduce it. This will not reduce, so you'll circle that as your answer. And then you type it on your calculator, 60 divided by 61. And then you round that to the nearest hundredth, 0.98. Okay, we did not use the sine button, the cosine button, or the tangent button. Super easy, right? But that is what is most missed on the test because students think, oh, I have to take the inverse of the sine and type it in on my calculator and find the angle. Because you think, yes, you are going too far. All right, so if we go to the next one, cosine of j. Cosine, which two functions? Okay, which one's adjacent? 11. And which one's the hypotenuse? So then we're going to write that as a fraction, which is going to be what? Adjacent over hypotenuse, 11 over 61. Again, on the homework, if that will reduce, reduce it. And then type it in and approximate it nearest hundredth. 0.18. Those should be really easy questions, right? Just be really careful you don't go find the angle because it didn't ask you for the angle. Okay, the last one, I just want to warn you, be careful because what did they change? The angle. And so sometimes that can catch you if you're going too fast through your homework and you don't pay attention. So now we're looking at K, and we want the tangent. What's the tangent? Opposite, which would be 11, and adjacent, 60. So then that's just going to be 11 over 60. And we're going to round that and get approximately, right, which we just did because we had the same fraction for the last problem.
No, it was.
Oh, we didn't? Was it the one before?
No.
No? None of them were?
No, they're just different.
Oh, okay. Okay.
But
Never
they
mind.
find out the same answer.
Good?
Yes.
All right. Last kind of problem for today is no calculator. So this will be on the no calculator part of the test. You may want to make yourself a note on your notes. No calculator. When you get to the homework, you're going to have to know you can't use your calculator. And I'm going to know because if it is a decimal rounded, it's obvious you used your calculator. This should be able to be found with exact values in simplest radical form. So it says write the cosine of 30 as a fraction. Oops, so sorry. Cosine of 30 as a fraction. Okay, so first of all, there were three special angles in our two special right triangles, 30, 60, and 45, right?
Yeah.
Okay, because we have these relationships, we can use these to write the value of any of these angle measures, so 30, 45, or 60, for any trig function, sine, cosine, or tangent. So on the test, it may be the sine of 30, it may be the sine of 60, it may be the sine of 45. It may be the cosine of 30, 60, or 45. It may be the tangent of 30, 60, or 45. Okay, so you should be able to find all of those. So when you get to this on the homework, first thing I would advise you to do is draw yourself a right triangle that has that angle measure in it. So if it's a 30, 90, then the other angle is 60. Then I would look at your 30-degree angle. Well, first of all, I would label the rule around your triangle. So what is across from the 30? S. What's across from the 60? S squared to 3. And then what's across from the 90? 2s. Okay? Then I would look at the angle you're trying to find, the cosine of 30. Cosine of 30 is equal to what two sides? Adjacent over hypotenuse. So you're going to look at the 30-degree angle, and you're going to find the adjacent side. What's adjacent to 30? Okay, s square roots of 3. And then what's the hypotenuse? 2s. So you're going to plug those into your fraction here. So adjacent is going to be s square roots of 3 over 2s. And if you've done it correctly, every single one of them will have an s in the numerator and an s in the denominator, because every side has an s on it, right? So what's going to happen with those s's?
You're gonna cancel.
They cancel out.
For real, thought that was a 5.
So what are we left with?
Square root of 3.
Square root of 3 over 2. And that is our answer for the cosine of 30. Now check it. Grab your calculator. Grab your calculator. Type in cosine 30. Now type in square root of 3 divided by 2. No, hit cosine 30, enter. Find the cosine of 30.
Okay, now we go.
Now type in square root of 3 over 2 and hit enter.
Automatically just like.
Yes, ma'am. Okay. What did I do with Bree's work? I had it all ready for her. And now I have no idea where I stuck it. Because she's not in this class. She's in this class now. That's why. So it is. Should be.
Wow. I got 0.7. 0.87.
Well, good grief. I got it all ready for her and I stuck it over here somewhere. But where did I stick it? It's not there.
Oh, really? Oh, that's big.
Those are Savannah's. Not there. It's not there. Here it is. Yep. There's Breeze. Thank you. Okay. So did you guys see that it's the same value? Yeah. But your answer, your calculator's rounded, in the square root of 3 over 2 is the exact value, correct? Because your calculator can't continue to print all the decimal numbers forever to infinity. So it only has a storage space on the screen of how far it can print the number. And then it stops. So it's not ending at that decimal point. This is irrational. It's going on forever, but that's all your calculator can print. We want the exact value. So we don't want to use our calculator if we don't have to. So your answer is square root of 3 over 2. Now, if you end up with the square root in the denominator, are you allowed to leave it there? No. So let's try one. Let's see if there's one on there that's like that.
Yo, the next one, the 45, what is this?
Yeah.
How are you supposed to?
Yeah,
Okay?
Yeah, that's over.
That's easy, right?
Would it just be one?
Tangent of 45 degrees. So now we go to the 45-degree triangle.
So 10 will equal 45 will be equal to 1.
So let me make sure everybody's caught up with you. Tangent of 45, draw your 45, 45, 90 triangle. What's across from the 45?
Yes.
What's across from the 45? And what's across from the 90? Okay, so again, you've got to start with the rule, draw your triangle. Now you're looking at one of the 45-degree angles, and it will not matter which one. Pick one. You want the tangent. What is the tangent equal to? Opposite over adjacent. Okay, so what's the, Javi? What's the opposite of this 45-degree angle? S. What's the adjacent to this 45-degree angle? S. And so when we plug that in, S divided by S is just 1. Type in tangent 45 on your calculator. You get 1. Okay? Again, you won't have a calculator for the test, but you do have one for your homework, so when you're doing it, you can check and make sure that you've done it correctly. Okay? Was that the last one? Okay, let me throw up one that is a square root in the denominator. So let's find the tangent of, let's do,
She's going to do this. She already put us.
I know, but, no, let's do the tangent of 30. Okay, tangent of 30.
30.
So we're going to draw our 30, 60, 90 triangle. Across from the 30 is?
S.
Across from the 60?
S square root of 3.
And across from the 90? 2s. Gonna have to know those, right? Like, that's so important. All right, so tangent is which two sides? Opposite over adjacent. So we're going to go to the 30-degree angle. What's the opposite of 30? S. What's the adjacent to 30? And again, so is the hypotenuse, but we call it the hypotenuse, not the adjacent. All right, so when we plug that in, we're going to have S over S square roots of 3. Okay, biggest mistake I usually see is the S's cancel, and students, for some reason, this square root of 3 magically jumps up to the numerator, and they say it's just square root of 3. But it does not magically jump up to the numerator. So when these cancel, what's in the numerator? A 1. Okay, so this is 1 over the square root of 3. And then we would rationalize like we learned about earlier this year. So we would multiply by the square root of 3 over the square root of 3. And we end up with what? Square root of 3 over 3. So the rule still applies that your answer should be in simplest radical form with no radicals in the denominator. And then you can take your calculator and you can type that in and see, is the tangent of 30 the same as square root of 3 over 3? Yes. So that is why in your calculator, when you type in sine of 32, you get a number. And it's always that number. It does not matter. So when you get to pre-cal, Mrs. Stinnett is going to have you memorize the sine of 30, the cosine of 30, the tangent of 30, the sine of 45, the cosine. So you're going to have to eventually memorize them, and not just those angles, but you're going to memorize any angle on the unit circle that can be found using a 30, 45, or 60 degree angle, like 150 degrees can be found using a 30 degree angle. So she'll teach you all of that in pre-cal, and then you'll take many timed tests over memorization. Do you have those memorized? Because you're going to have to know those values forwards and backwards when you get to calculus. Okay? But this is, like I said, the baby introduction to trigonometry. So we're learning just basic trig functions, how to find a missing side, how to find these special angles in terms of a right triangle. Okay, the only thing we didn't do was the word problem. Read it real quick, and let's just see if you have a question about how to draw the picture, because once you draw the picture, you can solve it.
So the steepest is 25 point. So that's the hypotenuse. Rises at the bottom. The bottom is 2 points. So you get the hypotenuse at the bottom. You don't got this side. So you know you're trying to how long is this section? No way to I don't know.
Got a picture? Okay, so tell me what you drew, and I'm going to draw it up here. It's okay. We're all, okay, drew right triangle. Mm-hmm.
And then in the smaller angle, I guess it's
Does kind of matter, but, okay, so it says steepest section makes an angle about 25.6 with the horizontal. So this is the horizontal, right? So the angle that's made from that horizontal is 25.6 degrees. Good, Sarah. What else?
the line going up is 0.9.
Okay, and it says its steepest section makes an angle of about 25.6 with the horizontal, and it rises 0.9 kilometers. So when you measure how far something has risen, you don't measure it diagonally, you measure it vertically, right? So this is how far it has risen. And it asks you how long the section of the railway track is. So also to help make sense, does it make sense that if the railway track is going up a hill, that it's not going to be horizontal, and it's also not going to go straight up vertical? Everybody's going to fall out. So it's going to be here. So this is the railway. Okay, and then it should just be a problem like we did a few minutes ago where we were working finding the missing sides. Do we need to finish it?
Yes.
Okay, let's do it. We are looking at this angle. So what would we label this side?
Opposite.
Opposite. And which side are we looking for?
Growing.
Which is hypotenuse. Which trig function uses opposite and hypotenuse? Not tan. Sin. Sine. Sine of 25.6 equals opposite 0.9 over hypotenuse x. When x is down low, you switch, you know. Or you can put this over 1 and cross multiply. If you switch, it makes it really fast. You just do 0.9 divided by the sine of 25.6. And we're going to round according to the directions to the nearest hundredth. So what is it?
Yes.
Did you type it in something in incorrectly?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, check it. So you got 2.08 kilometers. Don't forget your units. Anybody confused on anything I can help them one-on-one with? Okay, I hope that you enjoy this, because if not, the next 2 days are going to be torture, because we're just doing more of this the next 2 days. I don't think so. I mean, it's 2 core math pages again.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Do you want us to skip a couple?
No, I don't. Not this time.
No.
Oh, you got one. Okay. And did you figure out what you did wrong?
Yeah.
Okay.